All right, so we're ready now. So, Rick, why don't you take us away on those cannabis headlines?
Well, Mike, thank you so much. Welcome to 420 Post. This is the Cannabis News with Rick Thompson. Let's begin. The Supreme Court of Mexico officially decriminalized cannabis nationwide on Monday after ruling that the cannabis prohibition clause under the nation's health law was unconstitutional. 8 of the 11 judges ultimately supported the decision. The Supremes had already decided this in 2018, and in 3 years since, the lawmakers have not been able to enact a new law. So the court got tired of waiting and just struck cannabis prohibition off the books completely, forcing the Mexican government to scramble lawmakers into action. Now, if a legislative fix is needed, you can expect new cannabis laws coming online in Mexico within the next few months, or it could go to a national referendum, according to President Obrador. There's a parallel here to Michigan, though. Our state Supreme Court ruled Michigan's cannabis laws were unconstitutional in the 1970s as a result of the John Sinclair case. For 6 weeks in Michigan, there were no state laws forbidding cannabis use until lawmakers put one together and passed it on the quick. Here's hoping the Mexican law is a good one, and that it takes a modern approach to cannabis use by citizens and visitors. The U.S. House of Representatives Appropriations Committee approved the big spending bill they've been working on, and it contains things we like allowing Washington, D.C. to legalize cannabis, and including provisions protecting banks working with state legal cannabis businesses. Also approved, a report calling on all federal agencies to rethink their current policy of not hiring people with a cannabis use history. The report urges federal officials to change their policy of discriminating against cannabis users where the individual's private use of marijuana is not prohibited under state law. The spending bill and the report now advance for consideration by the entire House, where the bill is likely to pass as is, and then on to the Senate, where it's expected to face heavy challenge. It's a big week nationally for cannabis, too. New Mexico's legalization law began this week. It protects possession and home cultivation of cannabis, and 3 other states will also officially launch their new cannabis programs this week: South Dakota, Virginia, and Connecticut, according to Marijuana Moment. Final story, lots of special events were held this past week in Michigan, including fundraisers for Senator Irwin and Attorney General Nessel, the 420 golf outing in Flint on Saturday, the CannaCon convention on Friday in Detroit, and one of those many parties held after launched off at Cannabis Council in Detroit with a dinner created by award-winning cannabis chef Gigi Diaz. And on Sunday, a new event was held, Rally the Allies, in which about 60 people gathered together at a private residence to network and make introductions. All the events were fantastic, including all those great Friday events in Detroit. And what it really proved was the community is strong. We are still in alignment, and we have momentum moving forward. Congrats to all of those who hosted, attended, or supported those happenings during our very busy pre-4th of July weekend here in Michigan. Keep up the good work, everyone. And that's it for the Cannabis News with Rick Thompson on 420 Post. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Rick. I know I did my best at the after parties that went from 4 until midnight. Wow. Okay, well, that was fun, though. I enjoyed it. So let's go to Jamie Cooper now. She's going to kind of bring us up to speed on the cannabis community. What's happening out there today, Jamie?
Rick is absolutely right. It was one hell of a weekend, and it feels good to be back, to be able to see everyone again. And, you know, we do have an awesome community, and it's just, I appreciate everyone that made it out Friday night. And they were part of CannaCon. I even saw our guest, Andrew Brisbo, walking around CannaCon as well. And it really was a good time and a great way to reconnect with everyone in the industry. Speaking of reconnecting, we are relaunching our virtual Sensi Connects speed networking events beginning tonight. It will be our first event in about 4 weeks, our first virtual event. What we do is we bring everyone together every other week for an hour full of connections and conversations with maybe someone you already know or someone you don't know. You know, I'm a big believer in bringing all of our networks together and creating this referral network so we can help each other build each other's businesses. There are lots of more expos coming up. We have the Michigan Cannabis Expo at the Soaring Eagle Casino next month, July 13th, 14th. I do have a discount code for everyone for 50% off. Use discount code Sensi21. We're going to be there. Can't wait to see people again. They will have an after party the evening of the 13th. And then this morning I had a conversation with the Deltaplex. They are bringing back their West Michigan Cannabis Expo on September 10th or 11th. You can go check that out at wmcannabisexpo.com. But it feels good to be back. How do you guys feel?
Oh, God, yeah, we were just talking about that. Rick and I were chatting after 15 months of lockdown. Yeah, I feel it's great. I mean, I'm not sure if we're back to normal, whatever that is at this point, but I'll take what we got, right?
Well, I think
my social muscles. That's what
yes,
right. And I don't think we'll ever go back to the way we knew before. It's made a lot of changes, some for the better. So, we are all very resilient, and power to every single one of you that powered through this very exhausting, frustrating year. And I hope to see everyone succeed out of this.
Okay, now we're going to bring in a really flashy guy that actually has a lot of expertise. You're going to love his outfit. Dan Sparrow, who, disclaimer, works with me on the Hero Project and also works with me, 420 Post and Michigan Marijuana Report. But once he starts talking and the camera moves to him, I hope you have your sunglasses ready. Go ahead, Dan.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dan Sparrow. I'm founder of Sparrow Consulting and very deeply affiliated with the Cannabis Social Equity Fund that we've launched. Me and my wife, Connie, do a lot of things in the West Michigan side, and we have expanded our reach, and we're just trying to make great connections and make great community and get everybody on the same page. The weekend was wonderful, met a ton of wonderful people. My hat's off to Jamie Lowell and Rick Thompson for the wonderful event Sunday and the graciousness of our host. We really have been watching the cannabis climate in the caregiver attack, the attack on caregivers. And I guess I just want everybody to understand the messaging that probably should be being put out there. These groups that are after caregivers are after our individual rights to have 12 plants at home as well. And I don't know that Michiganders, after all the struggles and all of the fights and battles and legal, that we're willing to step backwards on anything. So the motto that Sparrow Consulting is backing is no changes. I've seen that going around for quite some time now. There's plenty of outlets. And if anybody has any questions or needs any sort of assistance in the cannabis space, feel free to reach out to Sparrow Consulting at any time.
Why don't you tell them how to do that, Dan?
You can reach me personally at 231-215-8432. Normally, if I don't answer the phone, I'll be back to you shortly. You can look us up on Facebook, Sparrow Consulting, website, same thing, just Google Sparrow Consulting. We're all there. We're a full service compliance and licensing firm with a very vast network. So if we can't get it done for you, we know somebody that can.
All right, that's one of the reasons we invited Dan on the show, is he has a deep background in setting up provisioning centers, grow facilities, things like that. I thought it would bring an interesting perspective. I mean, everybody has their areas of expertise, and now we've got a really nice balanced co-host crew. But now let's bring in our featured event here, Andrew Brisbo, the Executive Director of the Marijuana Regulatory Agency. Thank you very much for joining us. I also ran into Andrew at CannaCon and thrust a card into his hand and said, gee, we'd like to get you back on the show. We haven't had you on the show since December, so we're appreciative that you're giving us your time today.
Sure. Pleasure to be back, Mike. Thanks for the invite.
All right. Now, one of the things we really like to talk about, and you were spot on back in December, where you predicted that the adult use market in Michigan this year would generate somewhere in the vicinity of $1.5 billion. Rick did the math last week on the first report, which was, I think, just for 5 months, and it's actually going to come in around 1.6. So you have a really good crystal ball there.
Well, I'm not right about everything all the time, but I appreciate it being brought to everyone's attention when I am correct. It's, the data I'm looking at has 1.437 billion for this year, but that's not taking into account the steep increases month over month over the past several months. So, it sort of depends on whether we just get a steady amount of sales or if this growth rate continues, who knows? It's kind of leveled off. We had 105 million in adult use sales in April, 104 in May. It's hard to tell where this can go. We're all just kind of along for the ride at this point.
So I'm going to open it up now to everybody. I'm sure you all have questions. Fire away.
Director, what are the latest numbers as far as sales? We just talked about a rough number, but what's a breakdown between medical versus adult use?
So we see it trending where adult use obviously is outpacing medical. That was expected. Once adult use sales in a month overtook medical, I don't think there was any looking back. And medical had started to trend downward and now has come back up over the last couple of months as well. So the last couple of months, 104, 105 in adult use. It's been between 44 and 48 in medical. So I think that balance will probably continue moving forward.
One of the bottlenecks in the industry is testing. We're still at less than 20 testing centers, I believe, licensed in the state. Is that correct?
We have 17 medical and 12 adult use.
Aren't they the same?
By and large, I'm pretty sure all 12 of the adult use are also medical. Yeah, so I think 17 distinct sites.
Right. Now, there's been a proposal to ask caregivers to test their cannabis. There are 30,000 caregivers in Michigan. Are the testing industry clearly not capable of handling 30,000 additional users? Isn't that correct?
Well, I haven't seen that proposal. I've also heard rumors of that. The thing I'm not certain of is our labs can test right now for caregivers and patients. I don't know how much they do that. They don't report to us the volume of those tests. Mandated testing, if that were to come to fruition, I think certainly would be a significant increase in what the expectation of the bandwidth would be for the state regulated labs.
Let's talk about metric too. There's about 72,000 patients who are taken care of by caregivers here in the state of Michigan. The metric system seems to be pretty much at capacity. We regularly get notices that the metric system goes down. How would that fare if we added, plants to accommodate 72,000 patients into it immediately?
I think the platform can handle load, and we can always expand the amount of servers that we use in order to ensure it can expand to accommodate the load. I think the concern I would have with expecting caregivers to utilize that system or patients or any sort of home grow operation is the complexity of trying to get a decentralized group of people to use a singular system. We have a lot of energy that goes into supporting the use of the system by commercial operations, large scale commercial operators with compliance people who spend their time utilizing the system and becoming experts in the system and going through training, certainly have their share of struggles with getting the right data into the system. We were hesitant on reporting initially with metric data because we spent a lot of time with cleanup. We want the data. Metric is a great system for us to have a centralized repository for all of this information. A lot of the data that I have on hand is related to the reports we pull metric, that data is only as good as its accuracy. And so there was a lot of training and education that went into commercial operators putting the right data in the system, utilizing it correctly, whether they do it directly or through third-party integrators. So certainly if you add a home grower, a non-commercial user who's required to use that system, that's the educational lift and the amount of resources we would have to devote to ensuring the data is accurate would be certainly a consideration for us.
One last thing, we're looking at the Anderson Economic Group thinking that the cannabis industry is about $3.2 billion a year here in Michigan, and we're talking about somewhere between $1.45 and $1.6 billion in 2021. Do you accurately believe that the legalized cannabis industry occupies half of all cannabis sales in the state?
Yeah, I have heard and said I heard a little bit about the study. I was present for a presentation. They were nice enough to include me when they presented that information to legislators. I'd like to see the full report. I haven't been privy to that to see some of the methodology that went behind that. You know, the volume of the market when it comes to sales is certainly one measure and one that we talk about a lot, right? That's what draws the headlines. That's what everybody likes to hear about. But you know, one factor in that, when I think about it from my perspective, is, you know, we have $104 million in adult use sales in May of this year. There were 39 million in May of last year. But in that 12-month period, the retail price also went down 46%. So it's not just a jump from 39 to 104. You know, the volume of the product being sold is actually much greater than that. I'm not sure that the price point, if we look at the total, you know, volume of sales in terms of dollar value in the illicit market or the gray market, if you will, has that level of volatility with the pricing. So I think there are multiple measures that need to be examined when it comes to what market share is. But just in that increase, I think the good news is that we see consumers choosing to use the regulated market. You know, the agency's goal is to set up a regulatory system that allows for robust participation so that we can give consumers the safest possible access, which we think is through the regulated market, where we have requirements for testing and traceability, and we have some oversight over the means of production. So I think there's a lot more participation in the regulated market month over month, and that's good news. When it comes to the share, you know, against the illicit market, we don't have that data. I'd be interested to see all the numbers behind that, but I think it's a good sign that it's increasing the participation by consumers in the regulated market.
You mentioned volume. Can you tell us what the volume is? We're talking about monthly cannabis sales here by.
I can. Oh, Rick, you're testing me. I got to pull up a different spreadsheet now, though.
Dude, we're such good friends. By the way, Director Andrew Brisbo, DAB, DAB. I think you were fated for this job, sir.
It's like it was meant to be. So let's just take, for example, the pounds of flower sold through the regulated market between January and May went up 137%, 182% in the adult use market. So in January, almost 6,700 pounds was sold, almost 18,900 pounds in the adult use market in May. So wow. That's obviously that percentage increase is much greater than the dollar value that was sold. You know, you take into consideration again the declining price, and I think that's good news as well. Now, if I look at the average retail price in Michigan for an eighth, we're at $27 now, where it was well over $50 when the market first came to fruition. So we're getting closer to a place where, even with all the costs of regulation incorporated in testing, that the price point within the regulated market is close to that sort of street value, if you will, what it would be sold on the illicit market.
So and I think last I heard, a pound was somewhere around $2,000 now, down from about $3,500. Is that correct?
It depends on whether you're looking retail or wholesale. We don't usually report on the wholesale numbers. We do track that in metric, but because we have vertically integrated operators, it's not necessarily a true evaluation of market price at the wholesale level. But 3163 in medical, 3539 in adult use, but that would be at retail. I don't think many people buy pounds at retail. They better not be. They're not allowed to sell it at that volume.
As far as you know, they don't, right? Okay, Jamie and Dan, I'm sure you have questions for the director. Fire away.
Yeah, like I'm going to throw another question at you in regards to numbers. So where are we sitting now as far as the number of municipalities that have opted in for adult use?
As of the end of last month, our unofficial tally was 106, which is up 5 from the previous month. I don't recall the last month where we had that many jump in all at once, but that's 106 out of 1,773. So still
got a lot of work to do. I mean, that's a lot of municipalities that have not opted in.
Correct. And we have 1,396 that have prohibitive ordinances as well. So we still have a few that are in that gray area that haven't adopted any ordinances at all.
Now, do you think the fact that there's so many tax dollars being generated within these local communities from the sale of adult use, do you think that may persuade some of these reluctant communities to come on board? Do you think that's going to be a factor?
I have yet to meet the municipal official that wasn't looking for sources of revenue, so I think it can't hurt. It was nice when those distributions were made earlier this year from fiscal 20 dollars. So it took a couple of months for us to get the data out and for Treasury to set up the system to actually do the distributions. But I think a lot of municipal officials were interested in the tax revenue distribution, but wanted to see how much. So now we can actually put numbers on that. So from fiscal 20, it was about $28,600 per retailer and microbusiness that was distributed to municipalities, and that same $28,600 per location to the county as well. So I think that really helps municipal officials to understand what the numbers actually look like. Now, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I think in fiscal 21 that share might go down a little bit because now we have more licensees, we have more municipalities, and also there's going to be $20 million taken off the top for the funding for veterans marijuana research. But that at least gives municipalities a sense of what that money is going to look like when it starts being distributed.
Dan, do you have a question?
I actually have a few questions for Director Brisbo, and unfortunately, why we've never met, you have met my wife, and I'm hopeful that we will meet soon. My first question is the micro businesses. We've got the only vertical micro business operating in the state of Michigan, and we were very helpful in getting that operation up down in Decatur, Sun Provisions. And at that time, we had talked about the plant count and that there was hopefully some moves that could be made. Is there any news on issuing the micro businesses additional plants?
One good piece of news is we do have 4 of those licensed now. I can't guarantee they're all actually operational, but we do have a few more. But it's still an underutilized license type that was created there, though it was a new one, so we didn't expect it to take off quite as quickly as grows and retailers that pre-existed. But it's good to see that that's being utilized a bit. I have heard that concern about the biomass available to a micro business with only 150 plants. That would take action by the legislature to change that. I haven't heard any further conversations at the policymaker level or from stakeholders that they are continuing to pursue any changes there. However, we did have a recommendation from a work group I put together called the Racial Equity Advisory Work Group that suggested we create a new license type by rule. Our rules are in draft form now. We expect those to be published within about a month or so, and there will be a different license type, but somewhat similar in scope to the micro business that will be proposed there.
Thank you for that. The next question is edibles. While we understand the packaging restraints and not being desirable by the youth, they're also attacking some of the products. Are Rice Krispies and Suckers going to be allowed moving forward?
Well, we have restrictions on products and packaging, and I think you hit it on the head, Dan. The real concern is how to prevent access for minors, prevent accidental ingestion. And one of the things that I think we need to be considerate of, we control packaging, particularly as it relates to when it leaves the retail location. But what can we do so that once those products are at home, if they're not intended for single use, we can continue to ensure that they're not accidentally ingested, particularly by young people. So we do have requirements for certain products to be in resealable, child-proof containers. We've adopted federal standards in that regard. It's an ongoing conversation. I think as the industry evolves, we need to be aware of where those concerns might arise. I had mentioned in some of my previous discussions, particularly with stakeholders, that there was going to be an increased agency focus on issues of packaging and labeling that would appeal to minors. I think during the pandemic, with a less of a field presence by the MRA due to pandemic considerations, we saw things start moving a little bit in a direction we're not comfortable with. So we're going to be having some conversations with processors in particular who manufacture and package those products to be sure that they're falling in line with the rule requirements. And I think that's one of those issues that's good for everyone. It helps improve the perception by those who may not be completely pro-cannabis to look at the industry and say, that we have responsible regulations and the operators are responsible. I think that the worst thing that could happen, obviously, for public health is that we have anything negative happening to young people who are accidentally ingesting products. And that also, from a perception standpoint, is not good for the industry either.
Thank you for that. And while I'm by no means a tree hugger, and I don't mean that derogatory by no means, I also believe that our packaging requirements are making cannabis environmentally, we're just not conscious of all of the plastics that we're introducing into the landfills. It's got to go somewhere. So that's something else I would like to see, some biodegradable hemp packaging that's affordable for these retailers as well to utilize. My third question.
You want marijuana packaged in hemp? It's coming full circle.
Oh, the hemp farmers would love that. I mean, the hemp farmers in Michigan are looking for new markets, and I work with iHemp, and we've already talked about that. They'd love to do that.
I will say though that one of my focuses this year is where we have we had a sort of an ad hoc work group that was talking about energy use specifically, but it led into broader sustainability conversations. And I'm going to have a work group on that and involve industry folks, some of our partners from Eagle as well, where we can talk about environmental impacts. We can talk about waste use and disposal. So I've had some productive conversations. I know Colorado has done some pretty creative things related to that. So, we want to stay on the forefront of those issues as well.
Now, awesome. Jamie, you probably want to talk to him a little bit about what's moving forward on events, getting food and drink at events, things like that, right?
Yeah, I would love to hear, what kind of updates that we might be seeing around consumption lounges, events. I know we are still waiting for that first consumption lounge. There's not a consumption lounge operating currently, correct?
There's not. We do have one application that's pending. When COVID struck, I think that shot down a lot of plans for designated consumption and for events. We had a lot of event applications pending last April and May and March, I should say, when things kind of shut down. But we did have the first temporary event that occurred. We have a few more applications for those. The designated consumption is a little bit tougher. I've heard from interested parties about how they make that profitable. In our last round of rulemaking, we did open the door to say that you can serve food and beverages at those establishments as long as you have the appropriate licensure from the local Department of Public Health. Anecdotally speaking, I hear that that's maybe treated differently in different communities as to whether you can get that license and get your inspections. But we at least want to open the pathway. There's been a bill introduced at the state level that would restrict cannabis use at any licensed food and service establishment. So we need to have some conversations with the legislature about how that might impact this specific license type that was intended to be, used for that purpose, so to speak. So, it sort of depends on, municipal allowance of those and when someone actually develops their business plan where they think it can be profitable.
So you are part of the Cannabis Regulators Association. So how are things around that going? I can only imagine you're quite the teacher, for a lot of other regulators throughout the nation. So what's an update on that?
Well, just imagine 40 or 50 people who like talking as much as I do in the room all at the same time. It's just a regular cacophony of policy discussion, but it's been extremely productive. I think that the group generated out of just the need for collaboration. My counterparts from Colorado and Oregon and Washington were invaluable to me as we established Michigan's program, because who else do you turn to? You need to go to those folks who have been there and seen it and can tell you what worked for them, perhaps more importantly, what didn't work for them, what lessons they learned. And so formalizing those relationships has been incredibly impactful. Allowed me to establish connections in the Midwest, where now we have regional-based quarterly calls, where those are, I think they're every other month actually, for my counterparts in the Midwest, where we're a little bit farther along than a lot of the other states that are coming on board, and they can learn from our experiences as well. And now we're really focused on ensuring that federal policymakers know that we're available as a resource, that we have experiences to share, that we want a seat at the table when it comes to those discussions as to how federal policy reform unfolds. We had a great discussion recently with Congressman Joyce and Congressman Blumenauer, both from the Federal Cannabis Caucus, who wanted to hear from us and share, so we had a chance to share our perspectives. I think that's been very productive.
How optimistic are you that this Congress, that taking us to the end of 2022, will deschedule or decriminalize marijuana on a federal level? Do you think that's actually going to happen? I know there's been a lot of talk. There was legislation in the previous Congress, but what do you think?
You know, every day I hear the wind's blowing a different direction. I am not a Washington insider, so I rely on those who are. I think the fact that the conversations are happening both in private and publicly about the need for federal policy reform in the cannabis space, I think that shows that the conversation is headed in that direction. The timing of that is always subject to so many factors. You know, I know just from being in this space in Michigan for so long that it seems as though you've considered all the stakeholders and you're ready to move forward. And then the 11th hour, some group that you didn't even know existed comes up and starts expressing concerns. So I think that's possible. That could happen at the federal level as well. And certainly you have a lot of considerations when you talk about federal policy reform, including the fact that we have a patchwork of state regulations now. You still have entire states whose representation in Washington, D.C. is probably decidedly anti-cannabis. Like that's a very interesting factor to have to consider when you talk about federal policy reform. You know, you look at what revenue is generated by Section 280E of the federal tax code. Now, I think everyone could look at that and say in states where it's legalized, you know, does it make sense that those businesses are taxed as though they're illegal drug traffickers? But as an administrator, I can respect, well, you can't create budget holes that need to be filled, and even if it makes logical sense. So I think there's so much to consider there. And, you know, one thing I would implore everyone when you think about patience in this space, that you're trying to undo 90 years of existing policy, and that doesn't happen overnight and should be done thoughtfully so as not to, in this case, disrupt state markets that are really starting to flourish like that in Michigan.
Director, you mentioned earlier a potential new license type that would be similar to social consumption lounges. What more can you tell us about that?
I think that license was similar to the micro business, not to the social consumption. So the recommendation from the work group is out on our website. You can see what that looked like. We massaged that a little bit. I'm happy with the approach we took. I won't say too much more than that, because if you're interested, Rick, you should make sure to make comment during our public comment period so you can be on the record about that. And one thing I would mention as it relates to that rule set is, predictably, we get a lot of feedback if we try to adopt a rule that people are unhappy with. If you didn't like what we did, you're certainly going to tell us about that. One thing I would mention is if you see changes in the rule set that you think are positive changes, we need positive feedback as well. If you can put yourself in my shoes, if all you hear are the complaints about things, it sort of colors your opinion to think all we're hearing about is people don't like this rule. Maybe it's a bad rule. But we need to hear from people who are supportive of some of those changes as well. And that can be very broad or very specific, but please take that opportunity to comment. Almost every rule set that we administer is going to be open in this round. So there's a lot there to talk about.
I know you're an administrator and probably don't want to get involved in politics, so I'm going to ask a question that's pending right now on the Delta 8 question. It looks like, well, I don't know if the governor's actually signed the legislation, but I know there's probably will in September. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but a lot of the folks in the CBD community, and of course I have to do a disclaimer, we work real closely with Rob Robar from the Helping Friendly Company. He distributes nationwide to almost 2,000 locations. Some of his products has Delta 8 in them, and of course now he's got to change his formulation. But what do you think of the reasoning behind that? Again, this is more of a political question, but let me ask it anyway.
Sure. And while it may be somewhat political, this is an effort that the agency supported based on the public health concerns that, there had been some health action reports released by poison control centers around the Midwest about, young people getting access to those Delta-8 products, which are intoxicating in nature. And that's a concern. I think the voters of Michigan were very clear that they wanted the products, cannabis-derived products that have intoxicating properties, to be regulated. And this is one of those things where the industry just evolves very quickly, and all the definitions on what was categorized as marijuana and therefore regulated by our agency were based on Delta-9 concentration, because Delta-8 wasn't really a thing. No one really knew about that 2 years ago. So I think it's important that we make sure that our definitions are considering the advancements there. And I think the approach we've taken in Michigan is one that allows for opportunity. Most states that have taken action on this at the legislative level have flat out just forbidden and banned these products. Our approach is that they are categorized as marijuana. The Delta-8 products are almost certainly synthetically derived because there's not enough naturally occurring Delta-8 to produce these. And the agency has a pathway forward for converting CBD into Delta-8 and Delta-9 that as long as we can demonstrate that it can be done safely, we can allow those products to get to market. And it also provided an opportunity for us to clarify and have a singular definition of what is marijuana and what's industrial hemp. Having multiple definitions across the statute just creates problems for everyone. So I think it was a good opportunity to do that. And we were able to take the chance to sneak in a change to allow for telemedicine for patient certifications as well, which I think is important and is good policy.
Okay.
When diamonds were first introduced to the market, there was a question about the way that they were manufactured, and it was the MRA put them on hold. In other words, said they weren't allowed in the industry until a safe way of manufacturing was proven. Do you anticipate something like that with Delta-8, considering all of the controversy about its creation?
Yes, and that's essentially what we're doing now with the conversion of CBD to Delta-9. And I think we just open that pathway, assuming the legislation passes and is enacted. We would do the same thing with Delta-8. That we just need to check out the process, see what's being used, see what chemical catalysts are being used in that isomerization process. One of the main concerns we hear from the public health perspective and from my scientists is we need to know what catalysts are being used so we know what to test for as a byproduct. If you don't know what's going into it, you're not sure what to make sure didn't come out of it on the other end. Sort of like residual solvents in normal, processing from plant material. If you know if residual solvents went in, you know what to check for to make sure it was removed on the way out. So that's the kind of thing that we're engaging in. No guarantees that there can be a demonstration that this can be done safely and we can ensure consumer safety. So it's important that we evaluate that, but we want to be open to allowing industry the opportunity to engage in this type of product development. And if we can demonstrate it can be done safely, then, more power to you.
All right. Jamie and Dan, I'm sure you have questions. Feel free.
I wanted to ask, I know there were some rumblings about trying to remove the cannabis industry's ability to use like billboard marketing as a form of advertising. Could we see any sort of changes around marketing come down the pipeline?
Well, I think those conversations are always going to be taking place, right? I mean, cannabis is still not completely normalized. I think there are still concerns about youth access and youth exposure, and I understand those perspectives. The approach we've taken with advertising is always requiring data to show that the advertising is being marketed to the appropriate audience. And as long as information can be provided in that way that complies with the rules, will allow the advertising. And we think holistically about that. That not just billboards, but with radio or television or social media advertising as well. I think we have some tweaks that may be coming in the new rules. I don't think it's a substantive change from our approach. Happy always to engage with our legislative partners on their thoughts and their concerns. If there are things that we can do administratively that keep all parties happy, then we're happy to do that. If not, then legislators, that's their role, is to pass laws if they think there are concerns that need to be addressed.
Dan?
Yeah, my question is about local municipalities on their personal wars now on drugs, as an entire state had spoken and was heard and was given these licenses. It kind of comes back to the consumption lounges. the amount of hassle that people are getting from local health departments, is there anything that you can suggest that we do outside of writing a bill?
Well, I think local control was something that was given strong consideration both in the 2016 legislatively enacted bill as well as the adult use ballot initiative. So municipal officials have that ability on behalf of their people to make considerations for what ordinances they want to enact, what their processes look like for approval. And then there's a provision within the ballot initiative that there can be a local referendum as well if they want to change how the municipality approaches that. As it relates to the process, it does vary municipality by municipality. I think there are some concerns from those who might be entering those facilities about the safety of the workers. That was our approach with designated consumption, is ensuring that folks who are working in those facilities have access to areas where they're not going to be in a place where people are smoking constantly for an 8-hour shift. We certainly want to be mindful of that. As it relates to municipal processes, I think sometimes it's a new topic and they need time to learn and to grow and be open to education on what the facilities are going to look like. One thing I've always mentioned to industry operators is that they should reach out to policymakers at the state and local level. If you're operating a facility or you want to in a municipality that doesn't have an authorizing ordinance, invite them to go tour a facility in another location so they can see what it's like. I think if you have policymakers that haven't been to one of the facilities we license, what's in their mind's eye is probably not very accurate in terms of the level of professionalism that these facilities are operating under and the level of regulation at the state level. One thing that we are doing is we just did some recording and we're in the editing process now of producing a municipal education webinar where the agency talks about our role in the regulatory process and brought in some municipal officials to speak peer-to-peer on what their experiences have been, how they adopted ordinances, what they did as best practices, again, their lessons learned, just as we learned from other state counterparts. I think one of the primary things that's preventing municipalities from entering into the space, especially the smaller ones, knowing that the major municipalities have either opted in or trying, is they're concerned about being sued. If you have a local township, they don't have the budget to risk being sued. So it may actually be a risk mitigation approach from their perspective, just to adopt a prohibitive ordinance, because if they approach it in a way that ends up getting them sued, they don't have the budget to defend themselves.
Thank you for that, because a lot of people don't know Michigan is somewhere over 1,900 municipalities, and we're less than 10% of those have even opted in, and probably 6 to 7% of the 10% have opted into adult use. A lot of people don't realize that Michigan is a home rule state and that the municipalities are kings.
Well, and like I said, it was very clear in the statutes that the municipalities had an opportunity to decide how they wanted to approach it. There's subtly different language between the MMFLA and the MRPA, but still gives deference. And one part of our process at the state level is to ensure that the operation of a facility is in line with the municipality's ordinances.
Well, I personally have not had any bad experiences with anybody in the Regulatory Association since Gretchen Whitmer has taken office. So my hat off to you, sir. You guys are doing a fine job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, you've done this for a bit now, and I think I'll ask you this in December. Any changes you personally would like to make, if you could, or work through the legislature now that you've seen how everything has worked to this point?
One thing that now that we've gotten the Delta 8 bills moving, one thing I'm focused on is tribal participation in the industry on the commercial side. We have a number of, there are 12 federally recognized Native American tribes in Michigan, and a number of them have expressed an interest in operating adult use operations in some capacity, whether on the grow side, but particularly on the retail side. And as it stands now, the statute's too restrictive for us to allow state licensed operators to do business with tribally owned and operated establishments. So we want to open that pathway, ensure consistency in the market, just make sure that we have similar standards between the tribal operations and the state licensed operations. So that's something we want to look at. And I've had a lot of questions recently about the effort last legislative session to combine the acts, the MMFLA and the MRTMA, to have a consolidated framework for the regulation of commercial facilities. And most of our rules now don't distinguish whether it's a medical business or an adult use business. We've always looked at it as, you're growing plants, you're transporting, you're testing, you're selling marijuana products. We have some subtle differences between the two markets. I think that's something that could get traction again. That's not something we've pressed at this point, but as we discussed when you talk about numbers, the industry is kind of heading in that direction. So this twofold system, I think, has its flaws, and there may be time to still keep the policy ahead of that, whether that's in small doses or through some general overhaul. But as many of you know, who've talked to me about that effort to combine the acts, it's a lot of language to parse through. There are a lot of stakeholders at the table there. That's a complicated endeavor, and you need a 3/4 vote to do that. So you got to have everybody on the same page. So that's quite time consuming. I know I was pretty tired in December when that didn't get done. I wasn't quite ready to pick that torch up and start running with it again. And then generally speaking, from the agency perspective, where we're starting to head is to focus more on expertise that we need internal to the agency. We have lab scientist specialists. We recently hired an accountant. We're working on hiring a data specialist as well. But those are some of the things as the industry grows and the agency grows, we need to have someone who works in those more detailed areas in order to ensure that we are exercising our responsibilities in the most efficient way possible, and creating again that environment where businesses can succeed, but we make sure consumers are protected.
And then sort of your outlook for the second half of the year. I know you were saying that the prices are coming down, there's more volume going up. I mean, are you still pretty comfortable with 1.5, 1.6, or do you think it could be closer to 2?
I think it could exceed expectations. I like to under promise and over deliver. Not that I control how much product is being sold in the state, but I think we're at a place where I assume prices will start to stabilize a bit. I don't know if they're going to go much lower than they are now unless supply increases tremendously. So I think we might see bigger dollar figures, even though the amount of product being sold doesn't go up quite as high. But if we use the last couple of months as an indicator of where things are heading, even if we stabilize at the numbers we've had over the past couple of months, I think it's entirely possible that we could get closer to $2 billion total between the medical and adult use markets this calendar year.
Dan, you have a question?
Yeah, my last question. As Michigan really did pretty well with the medical program, and by that I mean they allowed the reciprocity. There's a lot of states that do not honor cards from other states, and Michigan did that very well. Also knowing Michigan is a huge tourist state. I mean, one of the bigger ones probably in the union. Is the MRA supportive of tourism in the cannabis space? And just an idea, instead of an Airbnb, a weed B&B?
Well, we're always open to suggestion when it comes to what the agency can do to ensure businesses can be successful, as long as we're protecting consumers. So it's within the law already that individuals from out of state that meet the conditions, so if you're over 21, you're allowed to purchase products in Michigan, you're allowed to possess them and consume them. I think the creativity and the creation of new license types was very forward thinking of those who are on the ballot drafting committee to give that authority to the agency, recognizing that adding new license types by statute and legislative change was going to be very challenging. So I think we're always open to concepts as long as we can ensure that it's done safely. We always want to consult with all the stakeholders. For example, we talked about curbside service. We continue to allow that post-pandemic. There'll be some allowances in the rules that allow that to continue. But when we start talking about drive-throughs and curbside service, we heard from multiple perspectives. So it's obviously the businesses think that's of benefit, and they've been very successful in doing that. A lot of consumers want to see that as well. But neighboring businesses and municipalities occasionally have concerns with the traffic that might be incurred when you have things like drive-throughs and curbside service. So, there are always a lot of different perspectives to consider, but if someone makes that sort of recommendation, it's something we can evaluate. And that's why we like having standing stakeholder work groups as well, so we can engage with them on some of these topics and ensure that we're gathering all that input.
Okay, one more round of questions as we close in on the end of the show. I'm sure some of you have some things you want to ask. Go ahead.
Well, Director, since we're talking about potential legislative changes, what changes is the Marijuana Regulatory Agency asking the legislature to do regarding Michigan's caregiver program?
We haven't made any recommendations in that regard. The only legislative proposals we were pursuing were the Delta 8 concern and tribal relationships.
You're not pursuing any changes to the caregiver program at this time?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you. That's what I expected you to say.
That'll make a lot of people happy out there. Dan or Jamie?
Yes, I guess I'm happy to hear that there's no changes to the caregiver program, as that is probably the largest rift in this community as of right now. That is great news, and it came from the mouths of a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you for answering all of our questions, and it was very nice meeting you virtually.
Pleasure.
I wanted to ask about your socks. I saw a post from you on LinkedIn several weeks ago about some very creative socks that you like to wear to some of the hearings, and you were kind of raising money with them too.
Yes, I'm participating in a program called Dapper Dads through the Sparrow Foundation. It's a fundraising effort where we put on a fashion show. I got to go buy a new suit, one that might actually fit with all this COVID weight that
Dan has a really good one. He could probably let you borrow his.
Love to see you in it too. Yeah.
So we're trying to draw a little attention to that fundraising endeavor. But it's really Kathy Gray's fault. Back when she was still with the Free Press, she caught on one day that I was wearing some funky socks, and that's I like to express my personality a little bit in the socks. So when I was at CannaCon, I had my THC molecule socks on. I found those up when I was on a trip to Marquette, actually, at a nice little store up there. So I like to do a little expression with the socks. I can't show you now because I'm in the COVID business attire, so I've got cargo shorts on now. I think I just have regular socks. But yeah, I like to express a little creativity with the socks.
Love it. And how can we support your fundraiser?
I don't know the link to that. If you look through my social media, I'm sure we provided a link to that somewhere. But if you just do a Google search for Sparrow Dapper Dads, you can see. And I got to make it in the top 12 because then we do like the fireman style calendar when the program is done. So I got to be in the top 12.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. I actually, on my LinkedIn page, I will share your post, Andrew, and our community as a whole would be happy to support you.
Sure, I will do the same in Michigan Marijuana Report. I'll look that up for you, and we'll get that in there we got about 3,000 folks that read that on Thursday, so we'll see if we can help you raise some money there, right?
And if you don't vote for me, feel free to vote for one of the other gentlemen there. It's a good cause all the way around, supporting women's health in the state of Michigan. So it's all good stuff there.
And then I would like a signed copy of this underwear calendar that's coming out.
And that might be my next endeavor there. I got to think how to monetize some of these things. Right?
I'll do it. Okay, any final questions before we do the shameless plugs here?
Director, I know that the MRA is really busy. Have you had any new additions, any new personnel you'd like to call out and say welcome to the team for? This is a great opportunity to do that.
Well, we've done some structural changes that everyone might not be aware of. But Desmond Mitchell, who many folks have worked with, he was with the registry program for a long time and was our licensing division director as well, is now our operations director. So he kind of oversees all the day-to-day stuff. So if you're dealing with applicant questions or licensee questions, a lot of that will route through Desmond. He doesn't like to do a lot of this public-facing stuff, so he lets me do that. But it allows me to focus on some of these big-picture policy issues and get out there and engage with stakeholders even more. But he handles everything behind the scenes. Jennifer Piggott was promoted to be our licensing division director. A lot of folks had interacted with her for a very long time. She was one of the first hires to the agency when we hired our first cadre of analysts. So she's worked her way up over the course of a few years. But we have a few other new starts that are in the agency now. I wouldn't want to call out any names because I'll forget someone, but we've had we were in a hiring freeze during the pandemic. So we've been able to backfill some of those positions that have been languishing for a while.
So let me ask you too, we'll help you lobby the legislature. Do you have enough resources right now? I mean, everybody always in the state agencies want more resources, but you have a big mandate covering a lot of a huge growing market. Are you able to do it with what you have, or do you need more money, more people?
Well, yeah, I would never say no to more money or more people, but we, between myself and some of the other folks at our agency, we have a long history in state government. We understand how the processes work. So we're always thinking very far ahead. So for example, in the budget, we hope to see finalized through the legislature in the next, hopefully in the next couple of days here. We requested some additional funding to make sure that the number of field staff we have is keeping up with the growth of facilities. That's one area we know is always going to have to continue to grow at the agency level. So we ask for a little more funding. We are very lucky in that we have the mechanisms to ensure that our revenue supports the administrative needs. We don't have fixed fees in the statute, which is always such a challenge from a regulatory perspective, because you'll never get increases to those fees. So we are very lucky in that regard. It's one of the reasons I like being in the position that I'm in. But I think we're in a pretty good place now. We've built in the positions with those specialized expertise areas that we thought were beneficial. But year over year, I think there are going to be needs to grow out certain areas of the agency. But I'm always very cognizant of the fact that licensees pay into this system and they should be getting value for their money. So we try to be good stewards of those resources and make sure we're executing our responsibilities as efficiently as possible.
Well, since you are on, well, I'm on screen now, but you'll be on screen again shortly. We do the shameless plug. But in your case, it would be, how can people reach out to you? If they have, a lot of people have a lot of ideas of how they'd like to see things change, and clearly the buck stops with you in that sense. So if folks have great ideas, or at least they think they're great ideas, and they want to share them with you, how do they do that?
I would encourage anyone to go to our website, michigan.gov/MRA. You can sign up for our listserv there. We push out a lot of information that way. You can follow me on Twitter at MRA Exec. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I accept all invitations there. And I do a lot of speaking engagements throughout the state. So if you're at any of those events, please come introduce yourself. Come hear what I have to say. If you're putting on an event, please invite me. I'm looking for any excuse to get out of the office, so I will come speak at your event. And it gives me a chance to go visit some facilities as well now that some of those restrictions are being loosened. So I love getting out there and interacting with everybody.
All right. Sounds great. I'm sure that's going to produce a lot of invites. A lot of folks would love to have you at their events. Right, Jamie? Let's start with you.
Yeah, so I guess we'll be seeing. Hey, Andrew, we have a networking event tonight, a virtual speed networking event. If you want to join us, anyone can join us for those virtual speed networking events. It's a great way to connect with others working in the industry. You can register by visiting connects.sensimag.com. Go ahead and create a profile. Once you're in there, you'll get access to some of the other B2B networking events that we do have coming up, whether it be virtually or face-to-face. And thank you, Andrew, for joining us today. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for the work that you do on behalf of the cannabis industry. We appreciate you.
And now we're going to go to the colorful Dan Sparrow. You can talk once again. This is where you can plug, what you guys do with Hatchaplan and all that jazz. And looks like you have your hero shirt on or something. I can't quite make out what you're wearing there, but go ahead.
My shameless plug goes out to Mr. Patrick Frakes of Rare Systems.
Ah, Rare. Okay, I couldn't quite make out what that little logo was there. Yes.
If anybody hasn't checked out Rare, please do. They cultivate and process all of their own products. So they have gummies, concentrates, vapes, and some magnificent flower. The reason he's here on my plug is because he donated several hundred pre-rolls to the summer annual for the MICA golf outing. And so my hat's off to him. Thank you, sir. And keep doing the great things.
All right, so I guess that takes us to Rick.
Well, thanks again, Mike. Thank you, Director, for appearing on the show, and welcome, Dan, to the cast. Of course, you can catch me each week on Roku Television as I do the Michigan Report on Pro Cannabis Media. You can also find the Jazz Cabbage Cafe every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Naturally, we have this particular program at 1 p.m., but you can also read my columns every month in the Rolling paper, which is distributed throughout Michigan through cannabis locations. And follow me on the socials, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything. I'm all around. Thank you.
Not to mention all the events you'll be attending this summer. Boy, they're just, you can tell everybody's been going crazy scheduling events. There's just one thing after another, but that's a fine thing. I have no problem with that. And so I'm Mike Brennan. I produce this show with the help of my team here, now including Dan Sparrow. But Jamie and Rick couldn't do it without your support. They're always coming up with great ideas. And if you have great ideas, you want to hear about them, and if you have some programming you'd like us to explore, Mike at mimarijuanareport.com. Be happy to take a look at it.